Welcome back to the Peaks, everyone. I'm so excited that you're with us on the show today because I'm here with my good friend, Phoebe Hayman, the founder and CEO of Seedling. Phoebe, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's great.
Before we dive in to the story section of the segment, I'd love to start out with you sharing a little glimpse into Seedling and the huge impact you guys are making in the world of play.
Sure. I mean, we're obsessed with play. We think about play as an experience, and we think about how that builds great character through childhood. And we design experiences in the way that a good chef might design a great meal. We think about, what is a crunch, what is the soft, what are the textures, what are the layers that kind of combine that, and then how do they feed your soul? So we think a lot about different stages of childhood development, and what is it that engages both the child and the adult. We think about essentially what we do is we make vegetables taste like ice cream, and that is sort of like how we think about serving our two customers. So
I love that intro, and it really lends back to why you guys started the company a long time ago in New Zealand. Can you tell us a little bit about the catalyst for that in the early days there?
Yeah, so when I have a degree in fine arts, and I came out of that and did, work in a number of sectors, worked as a curator in an emerging artist gallery, and then eventually found myself working with a nonprofit in New Zealand through my children called Play Center, and, really got exposure to early childhood there, and at that point came to realize when I was trying to buy things for children and engage with that sort of for the first time, that we were giving kids a lot of plastic imitation, and it wasn't real. And it made no sense to me. It was kind of like, why don't we give kids real things to have real experiences with? And so I made the first kind of, few prototypes. A friend of mine made really cool food products for a local market. And I was like, I'm going to take some product with me and try this out and see what the reaction is. And that sold out. Took it to a local toy store and said, would you guys consider selling this? And they kind of looked at it and said, well, it's not real toy. You can leave it with us and we'll try selling it. If it doesn't sell, come back and pick it up in a few weeks. And they called back a short while later and said, like, it all sold out. Can you make more? And I was like, sure, absolutely. So, I mean, that's, essentially like where had a philosophy, kind of didn't understand what was happening, tested a few things out, and realized that I wasn't alone. There was like a whole market out there who wanted the same experiences for their kids. And, we started very much running behind a bus from that stage onwards with Seedling, where we made products. It was sold to retailers. And we started getting inquiries from overseas very, very quickly saying, I came to New Zealand on vacation and I saw your products in like these beautiful department stores or in like the country's national galleries. How do I import this product into Australia, Japan, Europe, the US? And at each point, the question was, yeah, okay, why not? How do we solve that? So that was kind of our very first catalyst for growth. And we, kind of doubled each size year on year, and very quickly realized that the world needs product that encourages this type of play, and how are we going to form a long-term strategy around a company that was more than just supplying a local market.
Before we dive into that growth, how long were you doing all of this on your own and creating the kits?
When we first started out, it was maybe 6 months, by myself. With we had help with the kids and a few people who like would help part time. A very good friend of mine, actually the friend that was doing the other product at the fair, came along. I was like, "You come and join me. Come work with me part time." And then my sister actually, came and worked with me, and like was one of the best parts of Seedling. In terms of being able to not only work with family, but also have someone who was really passionate about it. And she worked with us at Seedling for a very, very long time until we moved here to the U.S. So, having people like that who care at the start were super important, and it wasn't just me. But it is funny to kind of look at like how that growth, kind of kept going without a doubt.
And you were just saying when they asked you at the toy store, hey, can you bring some more? We sold out. You said, yes, of course. Then when a lot of other retailers and museums were asking you, said, yes, of course. How did you identify and approach those growth opportunities in the early days? Because a lot of times you're thinking, yes, I'll be there. Oh my God, we don't have the products.
Right. I remember, one event was our very first trade show that we showed product at, and we wrote orders for product that like there's just no way that we had it. We did not expect to be getting the numbers that we did. And I remember thinking to myself, like, how am I going to do this? And I remember like working until 2 or 3 in the morning making product with friends, and like we had our first Japanese order, and I called everybody I knew to like come to my house to make product. It was my husband's cousins, it was like our cousins' friends. I actually met some of our very first, and like actually still work for me, some of our most loyal staff. On one of those occasions where like a friend of a friend called in some friends who had just like arrived in the country, and that's actually now my production planner, my production manager, and my general manager in New Zealand, who I met both that way, who came to my house and like literally worked on my kitchen table when we first started like trying to put orders together for Japan. So it's hilarious how the world works.
Oh my gosh! And so you still talk to them every day?
Yeah, and they're like, they manage the company in New Zealand for us. Yeah, amazing that's kind of like how that turned around.
When you think back to those days, whether it was at your kitchen table, it was at the trade shows, is there a story or memory that really stands out to you?
I think definitely, it's the sort of like, how do I execute this? That's the biggest challenge. And like, saying yes is one part of it, but how do you break it down? And so I do remember that Japanese order was our first export order ever. And that was a very big deal. It was a full container. Had no idea what that meant. Japan has very high certification requirements for kids products. No idea what that meant. But all of it was a commitment to solve that problem and work to that deadline. And so started sort of sourcing products very quickly, and trying to figure out what that would look like. Ended up building it in our house. At the time I had a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. And our house, we have these photos of our house. It's filled with boxes, and like literally it's like a little pathway that you can squeeze your body through to get from our kitchen to our bedroom. The hallways were all lined with product. It was everyone I knew for like days on end, long days, but they were actually some of my favorite times in the company. And I think that's when you learn how much do you care about this? Because a lot of the grit that it takes to get through those moments are things that become part of the culture of the company. And if you don't, kind of push through those boundaries, or you say no to those opportunities, what does it mean? On the same side, though, the thing about a place like that order for Japan is once you've made that commitment, it's a commitment, and you have to be committed to doing it the right way. And something that I'm always very cognizant of is like, what is the risk factor, especially when we were young on the payment side, for example, like how do we know we're going to get paid for this product? And talking to a bunch of people about how do we know that we're respecting the cultures correctly, the translation materials, the certification aspects. You got to be prepared to ask the questions, and that's part of the hard work that I think comes along with that kind of opportunity is you can say yes, but if you say yes, you better be committed to like the long-term like work that comes along with that. And it's not a matter of just kind of like all care, no responsibility. And I think that we've always taken that very seriously. I remember one of our points of pride, even until today, is that our team has never missed a shipment, no matter what. And
wow.
That's hard. I mean, we've negotiated to change shipments and change timings, but they've never missed a deadline in terms of a shipment for overseas. And that is a real point of pride for us, and that we respect that. And we've had teams that have worked until 3, including myself on the floor with everyone that we know, till 3 or 4 in the morning to get that shipment like in the container and on time on the boat. And we are just like, that's just definitely an integrity part to me of like, you make the commitment, you move it forward. And I think those stories are things that we still talk about. So if I go home to that team, like we still like, remember that time? And like, I still have that table. That table actually, funnily enough, just made the journey over here to the US. The table has its own story, which is hilarious, which is it's this huge, like long table so my husband and I, when we, digressing a little bit, when we got married, we decided that for each of our anniversaries we'd buy a substantial piece of furniture, and one of them was this new table, and it was brand new before I started Seedling.
Oh no.
Yes, and I love that table. It was like this beautiful large piece of teak, and it's a beautiful table. And then of course the company comes along, and like we had to manufacture and assemble product. We had nowhere else to make it. The table, of course, like was the table, and we started out being very precious. But now it has some pretty good scars from assembling product. But it's one of the things that I really enjoy when I see it is like I just know that's part of, you know, the sort of the effort and the grit and the commitment that I had to like that cause was that table and the people that were around it. And so I now have that in my house here in California. We brought it over, and, you know, I just think that there's so much of that story that you end up kind of carrying with you, no matter how the company changes. Those sort of, you know, foundations are super important.
I love that, and I want to dive into a couple of areas there. The first part is when you were saying, especially with an international order or just something that you've never done before, it's really, really important to ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
For someone who is about to ship a product either to a place or an organization or something that they've never shipped to before, do you have any tips of questions they should ask?
Well, I think make sure that you understand the requirements, and that you can meet those. You know, I'm a big advocate for believe in yourself, believe in like what you can do. Don't let other people define what your boundaries are. At the same time, you don't know what you're committing to unless like you've actually done your homework. And it's always something that I believe very much to be true, and that, you know, the commitment around what you see is probably half of what the true commitment is whenever you do something for the first time and you're walking blind. And so whether it's like a big deal, like we just dealt with Target, for example, our line launched there 3 months ago, and they've been a fantastic partner for us. We love working with them. But there's always things where you get kind of halfway into it, and then you're like, oh, okay, we thought that we had evaluated everything that we could see, but what about all the things that you can see? And, you know, so these days, as we kind of go into things, the discussion that I often have with the team is, guys, we're aware that we'll see half of what the commitment is here. Let's make sure that we're prepared to back up the other half, because we're not going to kind of get halfway through this and then kind of wonder why we did it. And it definitely has proven to be very true on a lot of the things. I mean, it is the hard thing about our business, and, you know, all businesses that are breaking new ground, is you just don't know what you just don't know. And, you know, how do you find that out? You got to ask the questions and be prepared to like not look stupid on the back end. You can't know everything. And to be honest, like even when working with a lot of these suppliers, when you're new to it, I see a lot in our team an expectation that these guys have a system that is the same. And so like, oh, well, this is the same for every customer, or, you know, the same in the industry. The true answer is it's not. Like every single one of these guys have their own rules. They have their own ways of doing it that they've built out through their system. There's no shame in not knowing. They're expecting you to not know. So asking the questions is not only good for you, but it also shows to the buyer or to your partner, whoever you're working with, that you are committed to really being strategic and thinking through the actual opportunity. You're not just taking it for granted. And believe me, they will have worked with people who will have taken that for granted and then end up failing and disappointing them on the back end. So they'll definitely, you know, appreciate the questions. And I've always found that it actually builds a great relationship.
So important. That's going in Jenna's learning journal today.
Ask the questions.
The second,
You always ask questions. So.
I ask questions of other people.
Yeah, there you go.
The second half of that, Phoebe, is more about you. So you're in your house, you have 2 young kids, you have people calling you, they want your product, you can barely walk because there's boxes everywhere. What were you telling yourself when you woke up in the morning?
Maybe the question should be, what was I telling my husband? Because what do I still tell my poor husband? When I was like, it'll be fine, it's not a big issue. You know, 7 years later, here we are in the U.S. But, you know, I think what it comes down to for me is purpose and passion. Absolutely, without a doubt. Things that I feel strongly about, I can do anything for. I have, you know, I pride myself on no reserves of what I would give, you know, if I really believe that it's the right thing to do. And so that's where I think finding something you're really passionate about is super important, and that you have a purpose around. And sometimes, you know, that comes from a place where you don't necessarily know why you're making those decisions. I think, the things, if I look back on my life and I say, like, what was I drawn to and what did I say no to as an opportunity and what was I just not that interested in, they all tie together, and over time it tells a really interesting story where I can say, like, oh, like I've always been interested in this and I didn't realize that was the case. I don't think you need to know what it is, but things that you have conviction around, it comes to light eventually. And, for me, I just knew that I felt passionate about, what I was doing on a day-to-day level. I love to learn. I was super curious. And I've often thought about my role at Seedling very much as it changes for me, constantly. So every few months, I almost have a different role. And that totally suits my personality. I love to learn and I love to change, sort of tacks in new areas. So I've always felt like the role has evolved, and so I've never felt like I'm doing the same thing. I think that's important for yourself to keep it fresh, but it always revolves around for me what that purpose and passion is, and then I think about what value can I bring for that and how does that change. So at that point, being on the ground, doing the hard yards day after day was like what it needed from me, and I was prepared to do that. And it wasn't easy. There's definitely moments where you wonder, like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? There's moments those around you wonder, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? But I think as long as you feel like you have a compelling reason and you have a need just driving it, even people saying to you, I had plenty of people in retail and in different environments, and they still do, who will say, like, I don't understand this. Why are you doing this? Like, or why does this product need to exist? Or, we think you should put like this on the front of the product, or maybe you should redesign products that look like this. And, it's important for me that we have our convictions and that we definitely take input and feedback. And that's, something that we are very passionate about too. But at the same time that we also have, understanding what are our sort of basic principles. And that keeps you on track, I think, when you're pushing through those hard moments.
For you personally then, when was the moment, and this can be with the market or not, it can just for Phoebe, when you thought, whoa, this is going to be big?
Yeah. So when I first traveled, so we had a lot of distributors that I dealt with through email, and I had young children, so I didn't travel a lot. I didn't make the deals face to face. People emailed us, I sent them information, and they came back and said, like, yeah, we're going to order product, and that was great. Eventually, I was like, I need to go and see these markets for myself, and I did a trip. And I hadn't traveled solo. I had kids. I had not traveled or even been alone, actually, when I thought about it for, oh my God, years. I feel like 4 years.
Oh my gosh.
I did this trip because you always had your kids or your husband or your workers, your staff, whatever you were doing, you were with people. And I hadn't really needed to travel at that point. And we were selling products to Europe and the US, and I'd never met these people. I'd never gone to the trade shows that they were selling our products at. So I decided that I would do this trip. And New Zealand's so far away, it's long. It's a long trip. And so we went, so I went on my own, first kind of global journey solo ever, and went up through Dubai and across to Europe. And the first show was in Germany, and it was freezing cold. And I met a distributor there, and it was the first time that it had ever been to that show. It just blew me away in terms of the size. And I suddenly realized how serious and how large that market was. But then I also realized that there was nobody that looked or felt like us. And that was a real light bulb moment. And after that, I went to, so I went from Germany then to London, did a show in London with that distributor. Same thing. I saw the reactions, and for me, what I love about being there was the personal reactions from the buyers were just as strong there as what I had seen at home in New Zealand. And, getting out and seeing that culturally was just amazing. And then the third place that I went to then was New York. So I did these 3 trade shows in a row, literally one after the other, week on week on week. And I came home from that just realizing the opportunity that Seedling really had. Also, for the first time, the scale of what I was going to attempt, of what size that was sort of a more accurate picture. I think it's easy, from somewhere where you're sitting at home and very comfortable to be like, yeah, we can totally do that. And then you get there and you realize
Whoa.
what the level of execution is when you're up against the Mattels and the Hasbros and the Activisions and the companies and the Legos that are just whole new next level. And I think I found that exciting, and I also found that some realistic snapshots for me of like what that was going to take, and that's when I think the first kind of thinking about sort of our company is going to have offices globally in order to do this, and like that's sort of like when we first started thinking about how do we grow the company strategically to be able to dominate in these areas. We can't do this from New Zealand by ourselves.
I'm so glad that you touched on that you can't do it by yourselves because obviously it lends to the rest of Seedling's story of where you guys are now, but it's also really important for any entrepreneur during those, first couple of years or first 5 years. There comes a point where either you take it this way and you go huge, or you kind of maintain and have a great business, but not that game changing industry owner, which is fine. Both
You
are
can make
great.
a lot of money, owner operated. Like there's that question of like, is that a good model? And it is. Like for a lot of people, it works. Absolutely great. I recommend it.
How did you know that coming to LA was right? Because that must have been a really hard decision.
I don't think you ever know. I think the question
Oh,
for me is, what was I prepared to risk to do it? And for me, once I had that taste in my mouth that Seedling could be something that the world needed, that was very big, and that I felt like, intuitively there was just this need that was there. Would I be satisfied being an owner operator that possibly, would have been able to have like, very great profitable returns, a great lifestyle? And people in New Zealand are always like, what are you doing? Like you could have the beach house and the boat and like work, less hours and have a team there that just do the company, and it could be smaller and just, enjoy that. Even my husband's like, why can't we just do that? But there's something in me that just wasn't satisfied with that. I believe that the company could do something really big and transform and disrupt the way that we think about this whole sector. And the question for me was like, was I prepared to lose that security to be able to go after it? And the answer for me was yes, I was. Even if it had not worked out, I would have been happy that I took the chance, and I knew that I would not have been happy if I hadn't. If I hadn't, it would have always been well, what if? And I chose that I didn't want to live with that. So that's what made me take the step.
how and when did you get connected to Kara and Solil here?
Well, I mean, so Kara was an interesting one. I actually, we had advisors that I had in New York who said to me, hey, I have this great friend in LA, you should meet her. And at the time, I was kind of like, yeah, it sounds really awesome. That's great. It's in LA. I'm a little bit out of LA. Kind of busy. Let me see how that's like. I'll let you know when I'm ready for the intro. Not today. And then we had a friend who works over in London in private equity who said, I want to send some information to this partners group who's like friends of ours, because I think that you should talk to them about Seedling. And it ended up getting to Mark Suster at Upfront. And Mark said, I'd love you to meet the CEO of like one of our portfolio companies. And this is like within maybe like 24 hours and completely like non-related. And I just said no to meeting Kara, to her friend. And the other email came through, and I'm like, I'm just meant to meet this person. So I went and I met with Kara at her office in Beverly Hills. And, it was kind of one of those meetings where I looked at what they were doing. I was like, you kind of have the parts of the company that I don't have, kind of doing similar things. I have the parts that you don't have. Interesting. I think we both realized on that first meeting. The meeting, of course, was kind of like how could the companies work together, possibly like collaborate on product or think about like supply chain or even us supply them product. It wasn't a meeting on anything in particular. But it's just fascinating how the second you spend some time with someone, you're like, huh, this is how we should work together. And it kind of quickly evolved from there. There was, and there's a lot of great ways in which, I think you meet someone who kind of has your equal and opposites, equals in some ways. I mean, like Kara has an amazing work ethic and, is in some ways like a perfect mirror reflection of myself for somebody who wants to do more. But then at the same time, we have very different skill sets. And I think that there's a lot of like complementary ways for that. So, that doesn't come along very often in a lifetime. And then, of course, when I met Soleil as Kara's business partner, Soleil had actually been one of our first stockists in the U.S. for Seedling. And her little store called The Little Seed, ironically enough, had stock Seedling products. And she'd actually been someone who brought them to Kara before Kara ever met me and
Oh
said,
my God.
it's so there's like all these weird connections. And I think that the universe kind of has one of those things where we're all here for a reason. Don't know what it is, but we end up together. And I think that it has been one of the most rewarding parts of Seedling's journey is to find people that are on this journey with us.
How fast did the time go from the first meeting that you guys had to you coming to LA?
Pretty fast. I think we met, sort of around August, and we ended up sort of deciding that we would definitely put an office in LA by the time that we got to like October, November. So, we realized that was, but I mean, we actually had already moved here. So we did have, so myself and my kids and my husband had already moved
Okay.
to open a satellite office here, but it was based down further south, South California. So, but for us to open the office here and establish the head office, that was the big shift because when we first came here, my role in this, in first coming to the U.S., was purely to open a satellite office, set up the team, go back home. And the head office to still stay at this point within New Zealand as we sort of established ourselves in the U.S. market and understood that market better and got some more long-term strategies in place. And it was sort of like a first voyage, I guess, into the U.S. But the decision to then flip the entire company and establish the head office here in the U.S. happened pretty fast once we sort of had met and I started to see that the talent was here, the people were here. I'd met a lot of Kara's team, for example, and I suddenly realized that there was just like this whole opportunity that, for us to build out this amazing head office within the U.S. with the talents, especially LA. I love the combination here. You have these amazing storytellers. You have this amazing kind of fashion industry where it's very sort of thinking about what does each generation want and how do we do that. And then, of course, a really cool startup community with a lot of grit, a lot of kind of like going to do it the hard way. And I love that. So that diversity is like something where, we've really seen, and we do pull very equally across those channels into Seedling. And we've been very excited about it ending up being the perfect home for us.
Before you knew it was the perfect home, so you get here, you
Yeah.
make the decision, all right, we're switching up, this is going to be the head office. What
Yes.
steps did you take after that? Because that's a massive decision that influences so many people in the company.
I think the key that you always have to ask yourself is if you're saying yes to this, what are you saying no to? And that was really hard. It was one of the hardest decisions in the company because I knew that there was no way that our New Zealand company could continue a lot of the programs that they were doing within those markets. So, for example, when we came to the U.S., we actually had the company in New Zealand was doing a third international distribution. A third of it was wholesale to Australian and New Zealand customers, and a third was direct to consumer. And we had programs in New Zealand that were running where they were both pop-up holiday scenarios, and we had our own retail stores. We had an entire retail program, which I love, and that was a really big customer base for us of people who were so supportive. But that is intensive. It's resource intensive and it's people intensive, and it's something that I would have to give a lot of time and attention to, and so would our team. We made the call that if we're going to the U.S., we were not going to do the retail program in New Zealand, and we were not going to pursue intensely our international program, which would put a lot of work into before that. So those two things were really difficult calls to make, and it affected like a lot of the team in New Zealand, and sort of thinking about what they wanted to do with the company. It meant that we were moving the creative team out of New Zealand and sort of shutting down that team quietly and over a long period. So it just naturally was one that we allowed to attrition through various phases, and that we built out a new team here. And that was tough. It was very, very tough, to kind of make that call. But at the same time, you just can't do everything. And if we tried, we definitely would have, I believe, made some very much bigger sacrifices than we would have realized that we were making. And so that whole thing of, sort of what is it that you're prepared to say no to? It's a long-term strategy, but it can be pretty hard. I have been really happy with and so grateful with how our team has embraced the decision to do that. And they've stayed loyal and they've stayed consistent. They love the company and they're excited about the growth into the U.S. and our New Zealand team. And but it's hard. I think that's a piece of growth where you've got to make some choices that don't necessarily not everyone agrees with. And you know what you're wanting to achieve, but at the same time, of course, people have put their heart and soul into the company, and it's always the case. When you're driven by purpose and passion, people are so invested. So those decisions have to be carefully worked through, and you get a lot of input from people. But essentially, everybody in the company has always seen the big vision for Seedling. As soon as you get in here, you're like, oh, yeah, this could be huge. Like, oh my God, we could be doing this and that and this and that. And people very, very quickly, our biggest challenge in the company always is like, what do we say no to? How do you prioritize all those common good pieces? And the fact that the people, when they come in, have been committed to that, has made those transitions a little bit easier, which has been great.
Do you think, Phoebe, had you guys not come here and established LA as your main office, these huge projects like Disney, like Target, like Maze would have happened how they have?
No, I don't. I mean, I don't think that without the people as well that we have that bring those things into the world the way that they do. It's all one step after the next. There's no jumps that happen. You don't kind of magically wake up one day and you're on a different planet, All these things are built on foundations. And, without those, I think even someone asked me the other day about our product Maze, and how it uses technology within the product. And they said, could you have designed this from the start? Because our ethos runs right through our company, and from the start of time until today, it hasn't changed. And the reality is, no, we couldn't have, because we would not have realized what pieces are integral for an experience. Without having our physical product history, we wouldn't understand that side of it as much. Without our digital product history, we wouldn't understand that side so much. And all these pieces add together to make this whole. And I just, every single thing that we've done to this day, builds us to where we are. And I don't believe there's any pieces that we could have gotten here without.
I don't think there could have been a better interview to kick off Grow, because we literally started at the very first trade show and barely walking through the doors into these huge projects that, like you said, are massive advancements, both for Seedling, but also for the state of play and continuing the ethos that you guys founded the company with to today. And everyone is so excited to see Maze when it comes out officially. What's the best way, Phoebe, for everyone who wants to learn more about you guys, children and adults, and your play philosophy, to stay up to date with you?
Sign up for our blog. That's where you're going to get content from us on both our philosophies around play, but also about the ways in which we think about these in physical product, and a lot of the events that we have coming up. We are big believers in hands-on, and so there's a lot of events to be able to find us at, and would love to see you. So all those ways are great ways to learn more about us.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for a wonderful interview.
Thank you, Jenna. I appreciate it.